Hey, everybody. We are here live tonight with Mark and Amy Coates. We're glad that you're joining us, and we're looking forward to talking to them and sharing a little bit about their ministry in Honduras and what God is doing in their lives right now. Mark and I actually went to school together way back in the day and reconnected a few years ago, and it's been cool to see how God has used him and his wife, and so I'm really excited that those of you from Flagship and others that'll be watching tonight will have the opportunity to get to know them a little bit, and so we're really excited about that. If you are watching live, let me encourage you to go ahead and share this on your page so that we can get other people watching, and so we would love for you to do that. But without any further ado, I'm going to let Mark and Amy kind of introduce themselves to you a little bit, and then they're going to just share a little bit about their testimony. And so we'll turn it over to you guys.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pastor, for the opportunity to share. First of all, my name is Mark, and my wife, Amy. We've been married. I'll say this. We've been married for 25 years. We have 4 kids. And I was very fortunate. I grew up in a Christian home. I remember pretty much always going to church. At the age of 8, I believe it was Daryl Dunn was the pastor that was preaching, and I don't remember what he preached on. I just remember him talking about hell that night. And when I heard that, it got a hold of me. We stood for invitation. I remember the singing. I thought it was going to go on forever, to be honest with you. And I held onto the pew in front of me, and I got through that. I didn't know what to do, so I got on the bus. My dad and my grandfather used to run a bus route from Apex to Durham, and so I got on the bus. And as I sat back there, I thought, "Hey, look, I've survived this time. I've got through that." And then as I sat there, I started thinking, if we have a wreck on the way home or something bad happens, I'm going to go to hell. I knew it. And so I took off, went to the front of the bus and told my mom. I said, "Mom, I need to get saved." And so at the age of 8, I accepted Christ as my Savior there on the bus. A couple of years later, I followed the Lord in believer's baptism and continued to grow. I was able to serve there at the church, join the choir, and even now this is one of those crazy things at the time you could do. At 16, I started driving that bus route from Apex or New Hill all the way to Durham, and so that was pretty silly. That wouldn't fly today, and so I was blessed. I got to grow up in a Christian home, Christian parents, in church pretty much all my life.
I have a similar testimony. I had the privilege of growing up in a Christian home as well, a small country church just between Apex and New Hill. And so, my mom and dad always made sure that we were in church, and my parents, sang in the choir and served and did things like that. And I remember, I don't even remember what age. I just remember it was between 6 and 8, somewhere around in there. I remember being in church, same scenario. I don't really remember exactly what the preacher preached on. I believe that it was obviously hell, dying and going to hell. But I just knew that, I needed to make a decision, and I needed to give my life to the Lord. And I did not move. I didn't move. I stood during the invitation, and I didn't go anywhere. And I remember getting in the car, and we didn't live very far from the church at the time. And I remember getting in the car, and we hadn't been long up the road. And I told my mom that she needed to turn the car around and go back because I needed to get saved. And I remember going back into the back right choir room, and kneeling with the pastor and his wife at the time. They were the ones serving at the church and getting saved. And I knelt that down, and it wasn't maybe a couple of weeks later, maybe a month later, I followed the Lord in believer's baptism. And again, we were always in church, and we did different things, and just as a little kid, it was difficult, I'll say, because you get saved, and I do believe in all my heart that I made that decision, but I didn't grow like I wish I could have back then. And that's one of the things that, in our life, even now, we try really hard to strive for our children, is to help them grow in their relationship with the Lord. And, you know, growing up, and of course, Mark's older than I am. But, you know, we started dating when I was a senior in high school. And, you know, after we got married, like you said, we've been married for 25 years. He's pretty much all I've known. I've been married to him since I was 18 years old. And so, with that said, you know, we kind of moved from the country church that I grew up in to trying to find where the Lord would have us to fit. And at one time we were driving back to fellowship in Durham. And we really loved, you know, Brother Rick Finley and all of the people who were there in Durham. And it was just too far of a drive for us. And we could not effectively serve the Lord like we wanted to because of the time that it took us to get to church. And with that, we ended up finding a closer church that we started going to, and we felt like we were really a part of that church and going to revivals and things like that, and really feeling like we were growing.
And that was in 03, I believe it was. And we had been going to this church for probably 6 months or so, and there was a revival meeting. And March 23rd, 2003, to be honest with you, I just remember that the pastor was preaching on being available. And
Jules from James.
Yeah, Jules from James. That was the series that he was doing in that revival. I believe it was probably the last night of that revival, and the Lord got a hold of my heart that evening. And in fact, after church was over, I talked to Amy, and the Lord had been dealing with her on the same thing. But you know, the pastor said that in order to be used, you have to be available. You know, God, you can have all these talents, you can do everything, but He can't use you unless you want to be used by Him. And so, March 23rd, 2003, I wrote in my Bible. Amy that same night, she wrote in her Bible that, God, I'm available for whatever you want us to do. And I believe that was sort of the start of us stepping out and making our way to Honduras. And while we were there, we started to serve a little more. We hadn't never really served much other than in choir and doing some things like that in a church. And then we started serving.
We started serving in Awanas,
yeah.
and doing things like that. I was, helping with Bible schools and doing some daily Bible clubs and things like that with the lady that was there at the church, and just really fitting in. And it's amazing how God burdened our hearts even then, and we didn't even know it once we said we were available, because we had a lady that was a part of our church at that time from the Dominican Republic. And she obviously, she spoke Spanish. And so she was drawing in people to come to church, children, Spanish children to come to church, but she couldn't drive. And so she had no way of getting them there. So Mark and myself, we would take turns. We would drive the route and pick these kids up and bring them to church. And that was just an eye opener at the fact that God had already put the Latino culture in our hearts to minister to and to help them. And then from that point, we just felt like that was something that we wanted to do, but at the same time, we kind of felt like God was moving us in another direction, somewhere else. And I'll let Mark go with that.
And then we actually left from that small church in Columbus Springs and went to Hilltop and under Brother Jeff. And it's amazing. Again, we look back and we see what the Lord was doing in our life. I don't remember the year. It may have been 04, 05. But the Ellises from Beacon, and they were going to Honduras. But the Ellises had come and they had shared their ministry with us that night at Hilltop. This is when Hilltop used to be at the old church down there, down the hill, not on top of the hill. And so that evening, he shared his heart and he shared the ministry. And I remember the Lord again, the first time that he started working on us was being available. Now he got a hold of us about missions. When a missionary used to come into our church, I remember I'd give $5 and I was like, hey, I've done my part. I didn't think about them anymore until another missionary come along. Or I bring the tithe card, it's got that, you can give your tithe offering or missions. And I was like, every now and then I'd throw $5 in there thinking, I've done my part for missions. I'm on the way. But that night the Lord challenged me to do more for missions. And we got in the car, we were talking that evening, and Amy, same thing. The Lord had been dealing with her about missions. We hadn't been doing what we need to. We need to pray more for our missionaries. We need to give more to our missionaries. We need to think more about them and just have them on our mind and pray for them. Because they're not in with their families necessarily, and so we need to do our part. And so the Lord challenged us that evening to do better about missions.
And during that time, I was actually teaching at Taylor and Hunter School. I was in the first grade as a teacher assistant, just helping and obviously working. But it was a difficult thing. I loved it, but I had some challenges that I was facing, and the Lord knew those. And it was just almost at the point where I had told Mark, I was like, I think I'm just gonna have to quit and find another job and do something else. And it was that time that Brother Jeff actually approached us. And again, it's all the Lord, working and just putting burdens on your heart and everything. But he asked me, he said, would you come teach kindergarten at our school? And I was like, Jeff, I don't have a degree. I've been a stay-at-home mom. I just started working as a TA. I felt like that was something that I wanted to do and I enjoyed doing, but I didn't feel like I was adequate at it. And, of course, him and Mr. Moots, Travis Moots was there, and they're like, no, we really feel like you can do this job. Just pray about it. And we, of course, had been wanting our children, because the school that they were at was a great school, Christian principal, and, the staff, I loved the staff there and everything. And, when they got to the 6th grade, we wanted to put them in Christian school anyway. And so the Lord just opened that door up way before, we could ever even have hoped for. But I started teaching and, just fell in love with the school and being a part of something that was, a Christian atmosphere all the time. And, a secular job, I know we have that, but working in a Christian environment all the time is very helpful and rewarding. And so again, God was using us to get to that point. And I had adopted Robbie and Christine as our class missionaries. And so I was actually, again, the Lord was just working on our hearts for that.
Yeah. And we actually, I'm trying to think, it was probably, when was it they actually came, or we were talking about, there was a Southeastern, their kids come to our church, not kids, they're young adults, but they come to Hilltop, and one of the girls, I guess she was talking to Amy about.
Oh, this is before that.
Yeah.
So with that said, so the Lord really places a burden on our hearts. And of course we had Taylor and Hunter, 2 older kids, and we decided that, if we ever had any more children, we would adopt, because there are so many children out in the world that did not have a home, that, that needed a place to belong. So we said, you know what, if we decide later on in life, because we're still young, we'll adopt somebody.
Not young anymore.
We're still young. But anyway, so we actually had a prospect that we were going to adopt a little girl, and we wrote her mom a letter and everything, and we were working at that, trying to follow through with that, but it didn't work out. But she's in a great family now that we couldn't, we're glad where she's at. But anyway, between that time, the Lord said, okay, well, we want you to have your own children. So I had surgery, and I had my tubes reversed, and we had another baby. That was in 2006. And, it was just a miracle the way that the Lord worked all that out, and opened up all the doors. And I had been sick the whole time, and I had graduated my kindergarten class, and we went to the doctor. We took Taylor and Hunter with us to find out that our little girl, her heart had stopped, and she had passed. And that was a very devastating time in my life for me. I know it was hard for Mark, but it was, as a woman, it was very hard to face. From March to June, almost July, that was a hard thing to overcome. But while that was a trial in my life, it was also a time where God used it to, one, to plant my faith deeper in him, but two, to give me something that I could use to help someone else. Long story short, we ended up losing 2 other babies after that one. So 3 babies in 1 year. And where he was going with the story was we had Southeastern students that came and served as part of their requirement for going to the college, and they served in our church. And I remember one night, I was up in the top part of the church with some of the girls, and they were so excited about the missions trip that they were getting ready to go on in the summer with the college. And they were talking about how they were going to Honduras. And I said, oh, that would be so great. My class, they support the Ellises, and one day hopefully we'll get to go. And they were like, you should come this time, Miss Amy. And I said, well, maybe one day maybe one day, whatever. And a little birdie had actually, I guess Miss Lynette Gaynor was sitting there and listening to everything that we were saying. And she, I guess, went back and talked to Brother Jonathan Blankenship, who I guess was Dean of Students at the time, and put the bug in his ear that we might be interested in going. And he reached out to Mark and asked us if we would be willing to go and be chaperones, since Kathleen and Christine were sisters and they wanted to stay with them, but they still needed someone to supervise the college students in the hotel. So the Lord opened up that trip for us, and we were able to go.
Yeah, we were able to go. We while there, the Lord really started dealing with our heart. Being on the field, getting to see these kids, because they do Bible club, they do all these things, and there's so many kids. They weren't necessarily without parents, but they were without somebody leading them. Mom and dad or somebody was at home, but they would send their kids out to Bible club, and you got to see these kids and play with them. Yeah, playing with them, and the Lord really broke our heart while we were there. And in fact, we even said, if we didn't have kids at home, we could probably just stay here. That's where we were at the time. That's our mindset. And I remember coming back. I was working with the fire department at the time there in Apex. And I remember as soon as I got back, I'm like, man, I really think the Lord's calling us. I was telling him, I really believe the Lord's calling us to go to Honduras. And I even told some of the guys in my department that I work with, I was like, I really think I could do that. And they're like, man, you're crazy. Now, why would you do that? You got, you're a captain here, you're this and that. Why would you ever leave what you got to go do that? And I was like, you just don't understand. Lord's dealing with our heart. And so to be honest with you, we got settled back into the States. It wasn't long. A few months later, we were sort of, everything was going along. And Amy, I want to share.
Well, with that, in the beginning, I told you the story of the 3 babies, and prior to going to Honduras on that trip. And Kelly Russell was getting married. She worked with me at Hilltop, and she's now Kelly Patrick. But she was getting married, and so I was helping in her wedding. And that day after I left her wedding, I was not feeling so great. So I decided to go take a test. And that is when we found out that we were going to have Josiah, who is our 12-year-old. And, we look back at that and we think, the Lord, we may not have went on that trip had I been pregnant or had I had a baby. And the Lord used all that to channel us, to get us to go there and see the ministry and see the need, but still gave us the desires of our heart. It was just a little bit delayed. And, again, it was just amazing the way he got us to that point. And of course, then we had Josiah, and like Mark said, we had our baby, we had our 2 other kids, and we did keep in contact with the missionaries through email, and Facebook at the time was not a big thing then, but we did communicate through email and prayer letters and things like that. And we just it kind of stepped back, but then God kept putting things in front of us.
Yeah. In fact, we had got a newsletter, and this is sort of the breaking, of the dam, for us. So we got a newsletter from the Ellises, and in it said, "Who will go?" And I remember getting that letter, and I said, Mark should go. Mark needs to be the one to go to Honduras. And I was scared to admit that, or maybe let Robbie know that that the Lord was calling us. So I actually was sort of fishing in a way. I sent him an email and said, "Hey, what is it you're looking for? What are you after?" And because I'm not a preacher, I'm not called to preach. I know that that's not, I don't even like to speak, hardly. And so I was like, man, I'm gonna have to get in front of people. If this is really God's calling, I'm gonna have to get up in front of folks and talk and do this. And then I said, you know what? If that's what God wants, then He'll help me to get through this thing. And so we did. And in fact, later, I think it was the beginning of the very next year, they actually called and invited us to be a part. Brother Matt and Robbie called and asked us to be a part of Team Honduras, and that's where it sort of took off from there. Quit our jobs, left the fire department, Amy left school, sold everything. And that was a really trying experience too for us to leave the state of North Carolina, really and truthfully planning to never come back to the state of North Carolina other than to visit. And so,
and it again, it's amazing how God just puts everything in an order, and how He works it out and deals with each of us differently, but the same. Because you see, Mark got that letter. He was working shift work, and so he had come home from work after working a 24-hour shift and checked the mailbox and got a hard copy of that letter. Well, I, on the other hand, was teaching, and during nap time at school, while my kids were napping, was checking emails and got the very same letter, but in an email form. And that was all I could think was, you know what, we should go. Why can't we go? Why can't we be the ones to go and serve in this capacity? And so it was amazing how the Lord just kind of puts those steps on both of your hearts, but in different ways. And, of course, Josiah at the time was probably only like between 7 and 8 months old. And, and then we moved out and started training so that we could figure out what it was that we needed to do for the role that we were about to take on.
Yeah, they're in Honduras. So.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I had never heard the whole story before, so appreciate you guys sharing that. It's really cool to see how God works and brings things together and brings circumstances and sometimes people into our lives to get us where we need to be. And I do think you mentioned something a moment ago about just being surrendered, being available.
That's right.
I tell people, especially young people that really have a desire to do God's will. I say, just give God the sheet of paper that is your life and let Him fill in the blanks. And I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but man,
it was again. I don't know that we didn't necessarily see that until probably a year or two down the road. After we had made that commitment, to do whatever God wants to do. And even we didn't see it, when Robbie and them came and presented the ministry, we started doing more for missions. But it was all set at the table. It was getting ready. But, you start looking back and it's like, well, the Lord started there. And then, next step. And it's pretty amazing. It really is. And again, I'm nobody. I was a firefighter. I worked I served in the church a little bit, in choir, usher, things like that, but I never taught a Sunday school class, never done any of those things in my life. And the Lord can use anybody. I mean, we're living proof of that, and so we're just thankful that He allowed us that opportunity and that time to invest in kids, and they invested in us because we received stuff from them as well, blessings, and it was just amazing to be a part of.
And it's amazing too, like you said, you don't see things right then. And sometimes, in our Christian life, all we can see is like what's right in front of us. But it's not until you kind of zoom out and, you step all the way back that you can see all of the ways that the Lord kind of just, intertwined everything and every encounter that you had to get you where he wanted you, basically.
On a side note, what would you say to other young couples or young adults or even teenagers for that matter that might be watching this or watch it later? Do you guys regret being available to God?
No. And
I'm sure it's all been a bed of roses since then, right?
Oh.
No, but hey, that's okay. Hey, look, I remember the thing is, we would not do anything different. There's no doubt that, everybody does. We all have things that happen in life, but there's nothing like doing what God would have you do. And you have that peace in it, no matter what you're doing, even, where we lived, I'll say this, Honduras is a beautiful country. They got some great people, sweet people, but it's a hard country as well. As far as it's pretty dangerous. In fact, when we lived there, El Pagresa was only 30 minutes from San Pedro Sula, which was one of the most dangerous cities to live in for people being murdered. We lived just 30 minutes or so from that city, but with that being said, we felt like God was always taking care of us, and we needed to be right there where God wanted us at the time. We were in His will, and so He's taking care of us. We wouldn't do anything different.
Yeah, I think that Mark would agree that the one thing that we could do different is to say that we were available sooner,
earlier, definitely.
And it's true, like. If God is tugging at your heart to do something. And a lot of times we push that feeling back for fear of, again, with just moving to Hilltop and, being a part of that ministry as a teacher and staff, I got to do things that I had never done before. And part of our staff requirement was that we had to go on visitation. And that absolutely scared the life out of me. Though, I'm not, like, I don't mind talking to people, but I have a hard time with confrontation and rejection. And I knew that I was going to face those things. And so it was very difficult. But those, again, were things that the Lord went ahead and put out there for me and, helped me overcome those things. And I'm so glad for that. And I think that, again, just making those choices sooner rather than later, those are the regrets that I personally have.
And something to add to that, Pastor, is I remember being in revival meetings or even having a missionary in. A missionary would talk about, serving the Lord. And I believe we were actually going to that small church there in Clifton Springs. And I remember thinking then, I was like, well, I can see myself going to the mission field when I'm 50 or something, after I'm done doing what I can do. In life here, I guess you could say, trying to live that dream, the American dream. But after we answered the call and we started doing things, I remember saying, we would talk about it, and I was like, I couldn't do this when I was in my 50s or 60s. I couldn't do what I'm doing right now. There would be no way I could be as effective right now. We needed to do it now. We didn't need to wait until we were 40, 50 years old to do what God had us do. We need to do it right now. And so, again, that was one of those things that if you look back, we would wish that we would have done it sooner rather than even when we did it. But we're thankful, again, that God allowed us to serve and to do those things.
So fast forward, you guys make it to Honduras, and what does life and ministry look like over the next? You guys were there how long?
We were there for 7 years in Honduras.
Okay.
We were a year in Costa Rica trying to learn the language. I'm going to tell you, what was I? That was 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 39 years old or so. And you talking about hard trying to learn another language, brother, that was tough, very difficult. But I remember when we got to Honduras, that actually the day we left Florida to go to Honduras, Amy got really sick. And we're thinking, oh no, we ain't even gonna make it to Honduras. This was a Wednesday. And we packed up 3 kids, Amy and myself, and we are at the airport. We get to Honduras, and it's middle afternoon, and it's Wednesday night, church coming up. You know, Pastor Matt and Nathan Massey, they actually come pick us up, drive us out to the house, and I think we got there probably 2:30, 3 o'clock. Church is starting, I think it was at 6, and it's like, oh my.
And we were like exhausted.
We're in it, brother. And so we were like, wow. And that night, I think Josiah and Hunter fell asleep during church, and we were wore out. And you know, when we started there in Honduras, we had to jump in pretty quick. You know, there was some circumstances, and so we had to jump in pretty quick. And within a couple months, we were talking about being unqualified.
Because it wasn't long, because I was like literally about to pop pregnant with Micah too, because he was a blessing. Again, he was a true blessing because we were not expecting any more babies. Right. We should not have had any more babies, but the Lord blessed. The Lord gave us Micah. And so, yes, we were there, never been to a doctor, trying to find a doctor. We wanted him to be born there so that he would help us with our residency. And you want to talk about stress? I mean, if everything could have gone wrong that first month we were there, we lost our phone service. We got pulled over by a moto cop. We lost electricity. I mean, it was just so many. It was hot as
it was hot. It was crazy hot.
And so it was just so many things. I mean, I even looked at Mark and I said, Mark, I think I'm gonna. And he was a month early. Mike was a month early. I was like, Mark, I think I'm in labor. And he was like, well, you know, let's go. And I was like, we started driving, and I'm like, no, just turn around and go home. I think it's just in my mind because I was scared to death to have a baby in a foreign country. Yeah. But you know, but the Lord worked all that out, and I mean, we had a wonderful doctor, and you know, and it just gave us. I'm not gonna, you know, babies are a great thing. They really are, and I'm gonna tell you what. Micah opened up so many doors in Honduras for us. Yeah. Because everybody wanted to see the little gringuito, yeah. the little white baby. Yeah. And with blonde hair and blue eyes. And so everybody, I'm telling you now, I was a very independent person because again, Mark worked fire department for so many years. And so I was used to hauling 2 children to the grocery store, or 3 children, even with Josiah, to the grocery store, Walmart or whatever. And so I wanted to do the same thing in Honduras, and I would pack Micah up, and you know, I'd go grocery shopping or do whatever. And I can't tell you how many cell phones his picture is probably on in Honduras, even to this day, because Mark would go, "Why did it take you so long to go get those few little groceries?" And I'm like, "Because every aisle I went on, somebody wanted to take a picture of him with him." So, but he did. He opened up so many doors, and I was able to share about the church and invite people and do so many things because of that.
And with that being said, we were there for probably a couple months, and we actually started serving straight away in the 6 to 9 class. And I remember, boy, I'm going to tell you, it was a struggle because it's one thing to teach in English. It's not. You know, you want to be prepared, you want to be ready. But in Spanish, I literally took a week and I would study my lesson for a week and just religiously, a couple hours a day, because I wanted to say, because the words were different, everything was different. And again, talking about being inadequate, we were not ready for that. But the Lord prepared us, and it made us more diligent. And so we did that. We were there for almost a year. When we first got there, the cottage wasn't ready for us that we were going to move into. So we had to finish the completion of that. We'd been there about a year. We took our first child in, and that was Angie. She came into the home, and I remember not long after she had come in, I went and talked to Brother Matt, our pastor, and I was like, Matt, man, I know that God's called us to here. And we've been here now. We've had the home open for months now. We've only got 1 kid in the home.
And you're talking about the home that you started for
in Honduras, yes, sir.
For orphans, is that right? Okay.
And so we've been there. We had 1 child in the home, and I'm going to Matt. I'm like, Matt, God's called us here. We've got 1 kid in the home. Well, it wasn't long after that we picked up the Bonillas. There was four kids that came into the ministry then. And it wasn't long after that, I remember going back to Matt and saying, I know why God was not gonna, he didn't want to throw 5 youngins, new kids on. We had 4 of our own on us all at one time. And so it was amazing again to look back and see, we were ready. We thought we were ready. And we were wanting to jump into it. We wanted to fill the house up with 15 kids, and we wanted to go. But God needed us to take our time and be prepared and prepare the way for us so we could get acclimated to things, to the culture. And, you have new kids in your house that don't speak the language my kids speak, and we don't speak that well either. And so it took time, and it was amazing again just to see the Lord work. We started out 69 class, and that was one of the neat things about serving there in Honduras. We had the privilege of serving in the 6 to 9 class, the 10 to 12 class. We even started an English Sunday school class while we were there for other missionaries or other groups that would come.
I also was able to help start a ladies' hospital ministry. And so every Friday I would take a group of ladies to the local hospital. And of course the hospitals there in Honduras are way different. It's just imagine a third world hospital, and that's exactly what you get. We would minister to patients that had to basically go camping when they went to the hospital. You had to bring your own sheets, your own food. You had to bring your own fan, your everything. You didn't get anything when you went to the hospital. You had to bring all of that with you. And so we would have people that would come and visit to bring us things that we could put in little care packages, like tissue, because you had to bring your own toilet paper. You had to literally bring everything when you went to the hospital. So in this little travel, bag that we would make, we would put like tissues and little trial shampoos and a toothbrush and stuff like that in there, and a track. And we would split it up because the hospital was so big that we would have some ladies going to the adult wards, and then we would have some that would go to the children's wards. And both were very heartbreaking. And it's kind of crazy because I was around so many things in the hospital that, I don't know, I guess the Lord sometimes, he kind of blinds you to some things so that you'll just do his will, that you just don't even see the dangers sometimes. But tuberculosis was like such a huge thing there in Honduras. And we could go every week, and there would be, a whole end of a hallway where there were patients suffering from tuberculosis. But we were still able to go and minister in the hospital and to see people saved and share the gospel. And that was an amazing thing. Just to be able to be by someone's bedside and share the gospel and give them a hope when they had no hope. And that was even different than, the children's home. But at the same time, I had our older girls would come with us, and they would minister with us in the hospital. And so it became a family affair. Yeah. And so, the girls would help share, we would break up, and, I would usually take 2 girls one week and 2 girls the next week. And then our ladies from the church. And it was just amazing to see them fall in love with that aspect of the gospel. And even to this day, Belkis, who is the oldest, she's finishing up at Pensacola Christian College, and she wants to be a nurse. She's, in her last year of nursing school, and she wants to be a nurse. She wants to help heal people the way Christ would heal them, as in sharing the gospel, and then help them with their physical needs. And that is just an amazing thing to see that, some of those aspects started with going to the hospital and the medical missions teams that came down, and her translating for them. Those all kind of intertwined, and the Lord burdened her heart in that manner for her country. And so it's just amazing how you take one step, and you can go on different steps as a family.
Yeah, and I was going to say also with that, Brother Darrell, when while we were there, a lot of those kids that we had the privilege of, of spending time with and loving on, a lot of them, they didn't have, they weren't educated for the most part. Some of them couldn't read, couldn't write, and do things like that. And so it was amazing. Oftentimes those kids learned, because we would do, what was it? Monday and Friday was English, all English. And the rest of the time it was in Spanish. And so we would teach them how to read in English. And so, but we would do that during our devotion time. And it was amazing to see our kids start to, take on. I remember, I think it was Dighton was first that couldn't read before, and he started reading in English. And he would stand up and he'd read his Bible verse. And it was amazing to see these kids start to take off. Katya was another one, where she was so far behind. And she had to start out in kindergarten. And she was what at the time? Was she 10 years old, couldn't read, write, couldn't do any of these things. And they started learning to read their Bible. And, we were able to do that through devotion, family devotion time. And one of the things I wanted Amy to share a little bit was about when she was at the hospital. We're ministering to these kids. We had at one time, what did we have, 23 of us in the home? 23 of us were in the home at one time. And there was Amy, myself, and one other girl, Carla, that were working there. We homeschooled those kids too. Now, again, we didn't do that by ourselves, because there's no way Mom and two people and Carla could do that. God made all that stuff work out. There's no way two people can do that. But he did, because he gave us a great group of kids. Those kids, they'd get on board and they'd help us. The bigger kids would help with the little kids, and it was just amazing to see how the Lord worked. But while she was there at the hospital one day, she actually, she got to see. I wouldn't go to the hospital, because I had been in the fire service. I knew right from wrong, and it would bother me to see the things that they did, and I couldn't do it. But she would be, these kids at death's door oftentimes. Willie was one, and I want to share just a little bit, if it's okay, about that story about Willie.
It was definitely going to the hospital was an eye-opening, heartbreaking thing. There's there's so many stories, that I could share, but one with Will, Belkis and I were there, and this is again how the Lord works. Okay, we were not supposed to be in the children's ward that day. We had planned to go to the adult ward. I had all the stuff for the adult ward. But for some reason, my ladies that were to come with me that day did not come. And they weren't able to make it. I don't know why, but Belkis and I just decided to go. We went anyway. So we went through the adult ward. We did our thing. And then we just quickly ran through the children's ward just to see. Because I had made friends with the nurses and the doctors that were there. The doctors weren't always there. It was mainly nursing staff. And so, we had a few peluches, or little stuffed animals in our bag, just from the last visit. So we decided to just go through and see who we could hand, something to quickly. And as we were going through all the rooms, we were coming back, and we had already been in this one room, but there was nothing on the bed, that there was no one there. But then when we were leaving to say bye, because everybody loves to say bye. So as we were going back through, there was a shadow on the bed, and I walked over, and there literally was a shell of a baby. I'll try not to cry. But anyway, there was a tiny little baby on a mattress that did not have any sheet or blanket or anything, wearing a diaper that was way too big. I mean, the diaper came up to just about his throat. And there was no mom or anybody near him. And I wanted to pick him up, but I knew that I couldn't do that. So I just kind of patted his knee with my hand until I could see that someone was there. And finally his mom came in, and she looked like a teenager. I mean, she She was probably 35, but she looked like she was 13. She was, maybe 4'11", maybe 80 pounds. And I asked her about her baby, and I was like, what's going on? Why is he here? And basically, in a nutshell, she told me that, she didn't have any milk to feed him, and that that was why he was here. So she bought this stuff called manzanilla, which is kind of like cornstarch, and she added it to water, but she didn't have water. She had river water, and so she added that to river water, which gave him parasites and diarrhea, and he became dehydrated. And he was probably 9 weeks old at the time and weighed about 4 pounds. And I went home that day, and I cried pretty much the whole way. And I got home, and I told, because I'd never seen that before. I'd never in all my life seen starvation before, ever. Even living in Honduras as long as we had.
Only a couple instances.
Only a couple of times did I see something like that. And it really broke my heart. I mean, it ate everything up inside of me. And I went home, and I told Mark what I had seen. And I said, he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I'm going to be honest. I cannot go in there and cook dinner for 23 of us, knowing that there is a baby that is going to starve to death. I just can't do it. I can't do it. And he was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I'm just going to have to go spend some money and buy some milk and some water and a bottle and diapers and stuff for this baby. And so because of the surplus stuff that we had, we did have some blankets and some onesies and things like that. And we got those things. And Carla, the young lady that was living with us, helping us, she went with me to the grocery store, and we bought the cheapest formula that we could buy. And the only reason we did that was in case she had to go out and buy it. We wanted him to be on something that at least she could manage. Yeah. And so anyway, we ended up going back up there, and I made him his first bottle, and he sucked that bottle down really quickly. And it was just amazing how God put that burden on our hearts. And then, it worked out to where, I tried to keep in contact, and, long story short, again, things are crooked, and the staff ended up taking the formula from her not to use because it was not written in the script according to the doctor. And that formula ended up going to some other baby. But the Lord had a plan, and he knew that. Yeah. Because even before I went back, we had a gentleman from our church who sent us a text and said, hey, I have 2 cases of diapers and a case of 20, it was like 20 cans of formula that we can't use because our daughter doesn't drink it anymore. And so we had that. So we knew it was God's will to get him into the home.
And that was, I'll say this, she went, and it was quite an ordeal because this lady, she didn't know what to do. She thought that the hospital was going to take care of her son. And when Amy went back up there, and her and Carla went together, the doctor, I think it was Carla, had asked, what happens if this baby dies? And he's like, well, if he dies, he dies.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. It's like, well, you guys are going to be responsible for this, right? He's like, no, nobody's responsible. He dies, he dies. And so she brought that little baby. She talked to the family. We got to talk to the family. We told them, give us 6 months and let us take the child into our home. Let us have 6 months with him and see if we can get him where he needs to be. And I'm going to tell you, Brother Darrell, I held that baby. I held that baby for the first time. And it was like, all it was bones. I've never felt anything like that before in my life. And God worked, and he supplied. We had an opportunity to love on that little baby and see him grow. Within a few days, he was starting to fill out just because he was able to eat. And he grew and he grew and he grew, and the parents would come and visit because we wanted them to be involved. We wanted them to see him and do all that. And again, that's something that Mark and Amy couldn't do. In fact, we got, after the fact, we were scared to death. We were like, oh my, if that child would have died in our home, where would the ministry be? And now, we hadn't thought about it. We were going to do whatever God wants to do. We were going to step out and help this baby. And he's still in the home. He's doing amazing. God's good. In fact, it wasn't long after that, she had met another child in that same hospital. And he was like 2 years old, Brother Daryl. 3.
He was 3 years old. His body was lacking so many nutrients that his hair was brittle. His hair had turned orangish blonde. He had so much fluid build up because his heart was about to stop in his feet, that his feet were about that thick. And his parents would not even go to the hospital to be with him. They sent their teenage daughter to sit with him to die.
Yeah, and that's what he did. He died in the hospital, but it was amazing. And that was, if the ministry of Iglesia Bautista El Faro, Lighthouse Baptist Church wouldn't have been there, Willie would have been in that same position. He would have died. And it's not because the mom and dad weren't doing everything they could; they just couldn't do. And so we were able to step in and help that little man, have a chance in life. That was all we wanted. We wanted him to have a chance to grow up. Yeah. And so there's many stories like that from Honduras. We're just thankful that we got to be a part of it.
It's hard to believe, there's still places in our world today, not that far away from us.
That's right.
Few-hour flight that are still in that condition. And so how old is Willie today? About how old is he now?
Well, he is getting ready to be 5.
Okay. I believe you shared pictures and things of him.
Yeah.
I remember that. Now, when you were starting to talk about that, I'm like, wait a minute, I remember that story.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing, and and it's heartbreaking when you go to talk to a parent like that, and you don't want to strip their children away from them, but they don't have the means, and that that's something, Brother Darrell, I know Mark would share too, but they're not orphans, so to speak. Every kid that we had the opportunity to help, through the Lord's guidance, had parents. They either had a parent or sometimes
a grandparent, uncle, or somebody.
Yeah,
somebody was taking care of.
Sometimes even we had 2 families where both parents were there, but they just did not have a way to make ends meet. The country was so poor, the people are so uneducated, and they just couldn't do it. And they have multiple children, and so they just could not do it. And like in his case, there was like 7 children in that family, and mom could not read or write. Dad worked selling vegetables. And
they lived on the river, no water, no power. They lived up in an area that's probably close to a mile off the road, on a dirt road where you had to go. And so these people had nothing. They were just surviving, and that's really what they were doing. And you say that, but where we were there in El Progreso, you wouldn't have thought there were people a mile off the main road that were living like that. Even though El Progreso is poor, a lot of the people are poor, but you go a mile into, off the road, and you find people like that everywhere, with living, just barely living. And so we were just blessed that we got to be a part of that. We got to have a small piece in that, and we wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah.
You may have already answered this question, but one of the things I was curious about was so when you go and do something, a lot of times you have certain expectations of the way things are going to be, and then when you get there and experience it, it's completely different. Can you guys share maybe something you learned that?
Well, one of the things that we learned well, that I guess we expected was that, we were going to just get all these kids in, we were just going to have a house full of kids and we were going to do all these things. And, and then we literally could have, we could have had the sad truth is we had to turn kids away.
That's right. We just didn't have the means to help them.
We didn't have the means. We didn't have the space. We did not. We knew God would have provided, but there was just no physical way that we could have taken them in. Now, did we look for places for those children to go? Yes. We sought out other children's homes, and we tried to move them around and get them to where they needed to be. But then we started thinking about, okay, how are we going to be effective? Are we going to take in 100 children and give them the basics, bread and water? Or are we going to take in the 23 that we have and nurture them and give them an education and make sure that they know what it's like to have food in their bellies every day, and
give
again,
them the gospel, give them a hope for tomorrow. And that's, with her starting out, I remember we had groups come down and I told them, I said, we're not, we're concentrating on what God has given us right here. Initially, Brother Darrell, we're coming from the States. We think everything's going to work just the way we think it's going to work, and it don't work that way. Yeah. You got to, you're dealing with different cultures. You're dealing with all these different things. And I used to tell them, the groups that would come, that we're trying to invest. We want these group of kids, the 15 kids we have right now, we want them to serve the Lord. We want, first of all, them to make, to understand what Jesus Christ did for them. Die on the cross, save from sins. All you got to do is accept that gift. There's nothing we can't work toward it. This is a gift. And so, once these kids understood that, we started to. Our church was amazing there. They had a discipleship program where new believers were discipled if they were interested, pretty much straight on. They were that was available to them. And so all our kids that were saved in the ministry there, they went through that. We were teaching them what it is. I say, you guys have so many things. We have so many things. The kids in Honduras don't live like you guys do, and we need to give back. And so we need to serve the Lord. And so all the kids that were of age, they were serving as ushers. They were serving in the choir. They were doing nursery. They were going out every Saturday. We go out and knock doors and visit and share the gospel. And every one of them that were at age, and they were looking for, that was one of the things that was the coolest thing. I remember David, when he first turned, I think he was 12 years old. He could read. He could do all the things that he needed to do. He had already accepted Christ as his Savior, and he got to go with us that Saturday. Got to go with me on visitation. He's a little bitty dude. Just short, and he wanted a picture. He's like, I'm excited. I'm going to get to go and share the gospel. And so that was one of those things that, just training them and teaching them. Of course, we thought we were going to just push everything through, and we had to realize that it takes time. The ways that we do things here in the States are different than the ways that things get done in Honduras. A little bit of a culture.
Well, and even with that, like a lot of things that we were trying to do, it made it difficult because, we fed the kids and everybody was healthy. We took them to the doctor, and we would show them before and after pictures and everything. And we would get a basic assessment on the kids when we would go and take them back. Well, culturally, the people there thought our kids were malnourished because they weren't gordito, they weren't fat.
They weren't fat.
And so we're like, well, you don't have to be fat to be healthy. They are healthy, they're eating plenty. And so those are some of the things that culturally we had to overcome and say, no, the doctor said that they're great, the kids look great. Or, and then again, too, coming from what we came from, stateside, having 2 older children and stuff, we never had to, lock anything up or keep anything up. And, we just basically told our kids, this is when the kitchen's open, you can grab this, grab that, or whatever. But these children too came from a place in their life where their meals came by day. And so they weren't used to having things. So when for a long time, the kids, we never had leftovers for a long time because the kids
Eat it
thought
all.
that they had to eat everything in one sitting, even if they were about to be sick and throw up. They felt like they needed to eat it all because it wasn't going to be there tomorrow. And that was a training thing. And, you know, for us, seeing that and seeing how that country lived, and just even experiencing little kids when we would go out for something just together, you know, when we'd have a little knock on the window outside of Burger King asking for what was left on our tray or the last little bit of drink in our cup, we realized how wasteful we were as Americans. And I'm going to tell you, that was a hard thing to come back to. The fact that, you know, we are a wasteful generation, and it helped us to be better stewards of what the Lord had given us.
Yeah, because it wasn't ours. He had provided. We needed to be good about the things we had. Sorry.
That's all right. That's good stuff. Good stuff. So, obviously, life is much different here in the United States, but one of the things that we deal with, I guess no matter where you are children that are fatherless in one sense or another, whether they are growing up in a single parent home, or whether dad's just absent or not involved. And I think, I think it's James that talks about, true religion is this, that we care for the fatherless and orphans or widows in their affliction.
That's right.
What do you think that as a church, Flagship Church or Tabernacle Church or whatever church, the church at large, how can we do a better job at caring for those kids? Because like you said, we can't be their parents. I mean, there are obviously situations where, people can get adopted and things, but for the most part, we only get to influence those kids a small amount of time. What can we do? How can we do a better job at those kind of things?
Well, like you said, even with the kids we had, they weren't, most of them had a parent or, had somebody that was there. But oftentimes the thing that you can do that, it doesn't cost you necessarily anything, but it's your time, spending time with them, showing that you care. And so Amy had said something earlier today, we were talking, and she had mentioned that away, in the home we were there, while we were there, the Bonillas had come into, I want to share this, the Bonillas had come into the ministry. They had a dad and mom. They weren't living together. The dad, that he had gone through a lot of stuff. He's a drinker, he's all these different things. And the kids come into the home, and Belky's, the oldest of that family, on her testimony, what she shared was when she left, that was the last time that she had ever seen her dad drunk. And she said that, and the reason for that was Pastor Matt, our church, we were, as a church, we were ministering, we were trying to, Hope of Honduras, we were trying to take care of these kids, but the church had a job as well, and that was to try to minister to these families that had these kids. And so Pastor Matt, he would go out and he'd visit some of these families, and he got involved in that. He went over and visited Ishmael and shared the gospel with him. He got saved. And so not only were we able to do our part here with the kids, but the church also reached out and touched Ishmael and as far as cared for him, showed that we're here for you, and it opened the door to the gospel. And she was also saying today about time, or the fact that you show interest in someone.
I think a lot of it has to do with how we can be a better. You never know what someone is going through, and sure, again, the children that we had, they, a couple of them did have mom and a dad that were there. But you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. None of us do. I mean, you think about your own life and things that go on in your own house. And unfortunately today, Facebook is kind of the worst because we all put up fronts. Everybody puts up a front, and things are true and things aren't, are hidden. Well, that's the same with older people, and the same with with children, I mean, children don't know how to express things a lot of times, but if you show an interest in them, and you are caring to them, and maybe you just, I don't know, we had one little girl, and all we did was we gave her a brand new dress. And that meant the world to her. And she carried a smile from that point. But for the longest time, she didn't have a smile. And, maybe there's a bus kid. Maybe there's a kid whose parents come to your church, and maybe they don't have a lot of things. Just doing something for that kid and making them feel special, making that older person feel special. I will share this about the hospital ministry on the adult side of that. So I went one day, and I was able to go in, and there was a man there, and he had Parkinson's disease. And and he couldn't talk. And the hospital had his arm tied to the bed rail and his leg tied to the bed rail. And of course, I'm a very affectionate person, and not over affectionate, but if I'm talking to you, then, I kind of want to, I want you to acknowledge that I'm there, so I'll touch you or something. And so his leg was up, and a lady was standing next to him, which happened to be his daughter. And I put my hand on the top of his knee, because that was what was sticking up. And I was like, "Hey, how are you today, sir?" Of course, in Spanish. And she looked at me and she said, "You don't have to talk to him. He can't hear you, or he's not going to respond or something." And I said, "No, I do have to talk to him, because he can hear me, and he's still here." And I was able to talk with her, and I asked her if he had ever trusted Christ as a savior. And she said yes. And and she was just very broken, because she had to watch her dad in the hospital, shaking, suffering from this horrible disease. And he hadn't been able to talk to her in years, and she didn't have her mom. And I said, "Isn't it a wonderful thing that one day he'll wake up in heaven, and that he will be able to tell you all about this story?" And of course, I was able to share the gospel with her, and talk with her, and I prayed with her that day. But it's about taking time to be with someone else. And you don't ever know what someone else is going through unless you don't ask. And
or if you don't invest that time with them, they may not open the door for you. You may just shut them down and go on about something else. But with kids, if you show an interest in people's kids, oftentimes that opens the door for the parents. If they see that you love them and that you're caring for them, they're more apt to listen to the gospel, and they're more apt to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Because they might not be doing things that are right, but when they see that you love their children and that you care, they're more apt to listen and see what it is that you have. So.
And that, there's no ulterior motive.
No.
Care for people, love people the way Christ, loves us. And that's one of the things that we want to do a better job of in Erie is letting people know that we want to share the love of Jesus with you, and we want to share the truth with you. And it's not about what you can do for us. It's about what he's already done for you.
Amen.
And, obviously ministry takes help, and ministry takes finances, and ministry takes people. But I think when God gets a hold of a person's heart, the rest will follow.
Right.
So, yeah, you guys have really shared your heart tonight, and I appreciate you being transparent and open. So, kind of in closing, what's God doing in Mark and Amy's life now, and how has he used what you experienced in Honduras in where you are today?
Okay, well, I'll start out with this. When we did come back, we started searching. We wanted to know where and what we could do and how we could sort of, plug into a church. And we've moved down here to Snow Hill big, huge place with about 500 people. That's a big city. But we found Tabernacle, which is in Kinston, with Pastor Cody and Nick, and we started going there. It was a year ago, April. It was Easter evening. We started going to church there, and the Lord that said, settle it in our heart. This is where we need to be. And so we got involved there with the church, joined the church, started. We're, of course, right now there's not a whole lot going on, but we sing in the choir. We actually started in August. August of this year, be 1 year. We started an adult Spanish Sunday school class, and I have two of the guys that are in our class. I'm actually, again, the Lord is good. He allows, He's letting me use, even though I'm not good at it, He can do a lot of good things, through us if we're available and we're willing to be used. But those two young men, I'm now discipling. I'm using the same books and stuff that we used in Honduras. They come from Beacon, they're in Raleigh, and so we're using that to try to disciple these young men, because they're still pretty young in comparison to me anyway. And so, but they have their own families, and they're hungry, and so we're able to do that, and that's the hope even for the ladies. We have the Sunday school class, and I think what are we running? At most, we've had 11 or 12, which is that's pretty good. I've never taught an adult Sunday school class, especially not in Spanish. Kids is sort of our love and all, but the Lord has allowed us to do this in Spanish, and that's our hope even for the ladies that are there. We can start discipling them. Amy can, and one of the other ladies at church, and help these families become what we feel like God would have our families to be like, and have them know what they believe and why they believe it. And it doesn't matter. One of the things that I learned from Brother Jeff, in my opinion, means nothing. God's word means everything, and so we try to use the Bible for reasons that we do things. And so, Lord has allowed us to serve there at Tabernacle. And it's been good.
And with that, one of the things that really drew us, obviously the Lord drew us there, but just the fact that they had such a bus ministry for Spanish children.
Yeah.
And, 25 children. Obviously, COVID has kind of shut us down a little bit, but just putting us there and being able to, talk to them and talk to their parents and, minister to them in that way. And for the boys too, for our boys, because that was the culture that they grew up in. They really, stateside is a lot different for them than it is for Mark and I, because they grew up out of country. And then of course here, working and serving, I've had the opportunity to tutor in Micah school here in Greene County. They have up to 5th grade. They have what is called a Los Puentes program. So the schooling is done. The first half of the day is English and the second half of the day is Spanish. And so there's a large population of Hispanics that are here. And so we've been able to, communicate with them and talk to them and invite them to church and just be a part of that. And it's amazing, how the Lord works and puts those things that are in your heart back on the front burner, so to speak. And so you have the grounds to be able to do that.
Well, that's really cool. It's cool to see how God is still continuing to use you guys. And that's the thing, that no matter where we are, whether we're, where we consider quote unquote home, or whether we're overseas or in our backyard, God can use us wherever we're available, and to make a difference. And I'm so thankful that after all these years, Mark, losing track of each other after school and stuff, that God allowed our paths to cross again. And
Amen.
And thank the Lord that He's done that. It's just kind of neat to see. But you guys have been a blessing to me. I've read your newsletters when you guys were there, and different things, but to hear it firsthand, it's been a blessing. And I hope that when all this stuff is over, that you guys can come visit us sometime.
Yes.
We're only 2 hours from Niagara Falls, so it'd be a good family trip to make.
Good.
There you go.
And so just consider that an open invitation. So
We
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
that.
yeah, and we have some folks with a Hispanic background that attend our church. We have a matter of fact, Flavio Rodriguez has been saved since we've been here. Him and his daughter and son and his wife rededicated her life to the Lord. And then we have another couple from Puerto Rico that attends. And so the Spanish population here is not nearly as large as it is where you guys are, but they're definitely part. I didn't catch that. What's that?
Cold where you are.
Too cold. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you guys come visit, you probably don't want to come in February. Well, can I pray with you guys before we get off here? God, thank you so much for Mark and Amy. Thank you for their friendship. Thank you for using them tonight to challenge us about sharing the gospel and being available to you, even though it may mean us leaving our comfort zone. Lord, life with you is an adventure, and thank you for using people. Lord, people, as Marcus said over and over and over again, it's not because we have anything special or unique to offer, but because we're just simply available vessels that you are able to work through. And so help us to always be available to do your will. And I pray you continue to bless them. Thank you for them sharing the story of I believe it's Willie or William, and how you use them in a lot of ways to save his life. And Lord, what a great testimony of your grace and your mercy. And Lord, I look forward to meeting him one day in heaven, if not before. We just pray for your will to be done in their lives and their family. And we just ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.